Hey, this is Chris Cross, host of another Shoddy Podcast.
Wow!
Okay, so today we are going to go over not one, but two star-studded weird stories. Are you ready? Okay, let's go, shall we? Dan Ackourdy, come on, you know him as the Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters guy, and now he's apparently an award-winning vodka producer. And yes, you know that too. It's the Vodka Skull. And if you follow the right kind of media, you probably know that he is seriously into UFOs, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. Oh, no, we're going to discuss a much more serious matter. I want to warn, if there are young children in the room, you may want to ask them to leave the webpage because Dan Ackourdy may have slept with a ghost. Yep, you heard me right. And no, I am not sipping from a vodka skull. You see, Dan Ackourdy is no stranger to controversial topics. Ufology is his most significant interest. He claims to have had encounters with the real men in black. He now filters his crystal skull bottled vodka through Herkimer diamonds because of their protective and healing properties. Yeah, you guys think I'm cray-cray. Anyway, that's not even the weirdest thing. The strangest thing by far is his apparent encounter with a ghost in the former home of Mama Cass. Yes, you know Mama Cass too. Come on, you 60s music fans. She was a singer in the 1960s band The Mamas and the Papas, known for songs like California Dreaming and Monday. Conspiracy theorists claim Mama Cass may have been killed by the CIA for her involvement with the Manson family, but that's for another time. Yeah, how about that? So why does Dan Ackourdy think he slept with a ghost, you ask? Well, let's get into it on another Shoddy Podcast. I am your host, Chris Cross. Danny Boy's closest encounter with the wraith kind was a bit more personal. Ackourdy has said that he believes a ghost climbed into bed with him, and he was pretty sure it wasn't asking for a bedtime story. Going into a little more detail on the Joe Rogan podcast, and yes, I know his podcasts are better than my Shoddy podcast. Anyway, Dan Ackourdy had this to say in that podcast. I had experienced one night where something got into bed with me. I was alone, and it tried to come on to me, and I didn't refuse it. Wait just a minute. Did Dan Ackourdy just say he may have slept with a ghost on a live podcast, maybe pre-recorded? I don't really know. He also claims that the ghost felt masculine and that he felt his shape. I know. I told you to put the kids to bed, didn't I? And Ackourdy maintains that he was not under the influence of anything at the time. He was simply going to bed early because of work on a film. When asked how the episode concluded, he said, "You know what? I snuggled up next to it and went to sleep. I have to say, I've stayed with movies that have ended worse." Ultimately, and years later, Ackourdy sells the home without knowing who the mysterious ghost man thing bigger than Mama Cass was. Look up the reference. I'm getting tired of filling you in. And get this, the house was sold to Beverly D'Angelo of National Lampoon's Vacation. I don't know why that feels so, right? Okay, focus Chris. Under California law, he was legally required to divulge this information, as California has a law requiring the disclosure of any unusual activity when selling a home. Yeah, and what's that all about? Ackourdy previously maintained that the ghost in his house was Mama Cass herself, but had doubts after this experience and because she died in London. Duh. But there was one other suspect, though based on a rumor. There was supposedly a man who, and in Dan's words, died of a drug overdose at a party, and they buried him in the hillside. Dan Ackourdy claims his daughter saw this man walking with a little red-haired girl down the hall. Either way, Dan Ackourdy, by his admission, slept with a ghost and snuggled up to it. Dan Ackourdy, having slept with a possibly male Mama Cass ghost, puts a whole new spin on ghost busting, doesn't it? Now, if that wasn't bizarre, how about this next one? David Bowie is cool, right? He wrote a lot of cool songs, hung out with cool people like John Lennon, and acted in a bunch of movies. Being a rock star who made it in the 70s had its perks, I guess, because one of those perks was being able to afford a home that had its own indoor swimming pool. Another one of those perks was all the cocaine a little nose like Bowie's could want. The rocker was known for his recreational activities. But there was one strange thing he was less known for, at least at the time. I'm talking about David Bowie's obsession with the occult. All of these things tied together, trust me, is going to be good. If you know anything about occultism, you may know that much of its popularity is due to a man named Aleister Crowley. Well, David Bowie was a huge fan of Crowley's work, in particular his membership with the 19th century organization, the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, to be exact. You could say that the Golden Dawn was the first organization dedicated to magic in the modern age, with its spiritual development in tarot divination, alchemy, astral travel, and other beliefs. All this led the organization to becoming the centerpiece in occult study, as well as Wicca and Thelema, the religion developed by Aleister Crowley. Bowie was fascinated by this sort of thing. There was a book he would keep on his coffee table titled Psychic Self-Defense, which the author promised would help deter malevolent paranormal forces. While much of his occult study is shrouded in mystery, we know that he had an affinity for books on white magic over black magic. White magic is the use of spiritual energy and ritual for selfless purposes, as opposed to black magic. So classic Jedi, Sith, Gryffindor, Slytherin, good stuff, bad stuff dichotomy. And Bowie was intent on using magic for good. The other kind of white magic that was also Bowie's friend was, yes, cocaine. In the mid-70s, he was hopped up practically all the time. It wouldn't be uncommon for him to be up in the middle of the night doing lines and reading about the classical elements and sacred geometry. Do a line, read a book, close the cover, do a line, read a book, close the cover. David Bowie had the rock star life down to a T. That was until he and his then wife, Angie Bowie, moved to 637 North Duane Drive, Beverly Hills, California. It was rather small for a rock star's home. It wasn't their first choice. Their first choice was a 6-acre plot of land with a posh Art Deco style home. Bowie made a fuss, opting not to buy the home with 6 acres because he noticed that there was a circular room in the home that had a hexagram painted on the floor. So they settled on North Duhaney Drive. One of the features was the indoor swimming pool, which his wife had anticipated would be a problem. Little did she know it wouldn't have a thing to do with the plumbing. Plumbing would have been a breeze compared to what actually happened. Bowie started feeling a bit strange about the pool. He started telling his wife different things about the pool area, but she thought he was just Bowie being Bowie. An eccentric musician is all couldn't possibly be true. There was no way that Satan himself was living in or had at least temporarily taken occupancy of their indoor swimming pool. But that is exactly what David Bowie insisted was true. He told his wife that one night he actually saw Satan rise out of the pool, suspended in the air, right before his very eyes. This was not cool at all. I mean, it's not cool to have Satan in your swimming pool for starts, and that's a given, but imagine your husband is waking you up at night saying, honey, I think I saw Satan in the pool again. I don't think you'd be very thankful. You'd want him to shut up and get back to bed, but he can't. Remember, do a line, read a book, close the cover, do a line, see Satan rising out of your pool. Eventually, David Bowie needed to do something about this pool stealing Satan. And what do you do when you need to get rid of a demon in your pool? You get an exorcist. His wife did some poking around, trying to find an exorcist as you do when you're married to David Bowie. And she discovered that the local Greek Orthodox church had someone who would be willing to do it for, I am sure, a hefty donation. Sorry, local Greek Orthodox church, no new roof that year. So that didn't happen though, because David Bowie made this strict no strangers involved rule. He contacted his friend, Wally Elmlark. Elmlark was relatively well known throughout the scene at the time as a sort of spiritual guru. It is said that she had personally performed the ritual on Bowie when he was in the middle of a particularly dark part of his life. She was, well, all due respect, his white witch. Unfortunately, she could not be there personally, but gave Bowie instructions on what to do. So now I am going to set the scene for you. One late night, of course it has to be one late night. Bowie, with his wife watching, performed the exorcism with only the transcribed instructions from his rock and roll white witch, and a smattering of occult artifacts from Bowie's personal collection propped up on an old-fashioned lectern. David's wife was later reported as saying, I had no idea what was being said or what language it was being said in, but I couldn't stop this weird cold feeling rising up in me as David droned on and on. I don't know about you, but I certainly get the impression that David Bowie may have had the habit of, how did she put it, droning on and on. Yeah, that was it. As the exorcism pressed on, she said something happened. There's no easy or elegant way to say this, so I'll just say it straight. At a certain point in the ritual, the pool began to bubble. It bubbled vigorously, perhaps thrashed is a better term, in a manner inconsistent with any explanation involving air filters or the like. And yep, you guessed it. Shortly thereafter, and on Bowie's insistence, the couple moved out of the home. His wife, Angie, has gone on to say that there's nothing that can explain what she saw that night. Angie never shared her husband's affinity with ritual magic, white or not, but she insists she saw what she saw, and it seems that Bowie never spoke of it again. Well, hey, this is Chris Cross, host of another Shoddy Podcast. This has been a Chris Cross production in conjunction with